Alrighty, folks, we got ourselves a hotfix that I'm not sure is entirely out yet, as you can tell by the throwback look of Vault. But I think our servers might still be down. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm not going to bother to check for the moment. But once the servers come back on, there is a hotfix that will go live that I'm sure many of you will want to hear about, because a bunch of you cheesers for Vault are going to have to learn to do it the normal way. So starting from the very top, I just already screwed up the pose. Gosh damn it. So starting from the top, in free roam, they added an energy barrier to the Scavenger's Den Lost Sector in the EDZ, while on Legend or Master difficulty to prevent skipping most of the encounters. So basically, in Scavenger's Den, you gotta do it the actual way. And in addition, the Empty Tank Lost Sector now shows the correct exotic gear in line with the other rewards rotation. So if it says you get boots, you should get boots. If it says you get gloves, you should get gloves. And moving on to the real hard hitter is things they fixed in the raids. Basically, they adjusted the mods. They now appear in the collections tab, the Vaulted Glass Armor mods. If you couldn't see what they were or what you got, now you can. They also fixed an issue where players could kill Atheon by tethering supplicants as they self-destruct. So the tether cheese is gone. Fixed an issue where players could kill Atheon in the future Venus portal before starting the encounter. So the all eyes on Atheon glitch is gone, so you can no longer gatekeeper glitched it. Fixed an issue where players could break Minotaur shields using the break Minotaur shields in gatekeeper encounter by using Prometheus lens. So the gatekeeper cheese is also gone. Every cheese before every cheese in both Gatekeeper and Atheon has since been fixed, and I don't think there's many else around in Vault. And for the last raid fix, they fixed an issue where the Aegis Relic blocking ability was not continuously blocking damage. So all those Vault cheeses and a few corrections to Vault-specific encounters. Now, and for gameplay and investment, for armor, the Path of the Burning Steps no longer grants a stack of its buff, the Firewalker buff, when you just get slowed by stasis. Now it only applies the Firewalker buff when you become encased, i.e. frozen. Now, for Star Eater scales, they correctly fixed its damage bonus when standing in a well of radiance. When standing in a well of radiance. And now the Feast of Light will correctly display. Before, it took 2 orbs to get a single stack on screen, even though it took 8 stacks. Now it correctly scales up to 8 times, gaining 1 stack per orb. So to fully max out Star Eater scales, you need to max out Feast of Light times 8. Now, fixed an issue in calculating super bonus damage. Having 4 stacks of Feast of Light will grant a 55% bonus to super damage, and having full 8 stacks will grant a 70% to super damage. 77 buff. For context, the original formula at the start of the season was a 60% bonus at 4 stacks. So technically, it is better. It just is harder to max out. It's better, but harder, if that makes sense. They also fixed an issue with the Roar of the Worm ornament for Whisper of the Worm's exotic geometry, which display when walking against walls. So that's just a low texture glitch. And then, including bounties and pursuits, fixed an issue where projectile melee abilities weren't counting towards the progress for Step 4 of the Iron-Handed Diplomacy quest. Don't know how that bug was discovered and fixed before an Iron Banner, but either way. Fixed an issue where the Capture Completionist Triumph would not properly unlock for players. So I imagine that's just more Iron Banner. So this is also, I believe, the hotfix where Stasis gets nerfed into the ground. At least a lot of the Stasis abusers are going to be saying that. Stasis Freeze. Reduced duration of all non-super freezes, i.e. Cold Snap, Penumbral Blast, any ability of Stasis that isn't a super, including grenades. Basically, all freezes now only last for 1.35 seconds. And note, the freeze is too short to break out, so breaking out is not only possible when you are frozen by a super. And I believe this is all PvP specific changes. They didn't really specify, but I imagine it is. Reduce special weapon, heavy weapon, and light ability bonus damage versus frozen players from 50% down to 5. So there is only a slight damage buff when a special weapon, heavy weapon, or light ability does damage to a frozen player. Now, the Stasis Slow. It no longer reduces weapon accuracy, but now increases weapon flinch when under fire. And now it no longer suppresses class abilities and air movements, aka the average jetpack and double jumps. Known issue, they did mention this before, the Stormcaller's Ionic Blink is still suppressed when slow. Planning on fixing that. That is not still intentional. and reduced the movement speed penalty while slowed by 20%. Now, moving on to various fragments, the Whisper of Hedrons no longer increases weapon damage after freezing, but now increases stability, weapon aim assist, mobility, resilience, and recovery after freezing. So instead of basic weapon damage, you get a general stat boost after freezing something. Now, the Whisper of Rhyme fragment, it no longer provides overshields while in Super. It still does its job, just not in Super. So that's good. And the nerf to Cold Snap grenade, because everyone's going to change grenades again after this nerf. The Seeker no longer tracks targets after initial target acquisition. So, if somebody's directly ahead of you, you throw a Cold Snap, it will track to them. If they move out of the way of it, it will not continue to go after them. It'll keep going straight until it fades. Basic description for Cold Snaps if people think it's not working. Increased the arming duration before Seeker spawns from 0.3 seconds to 0.8. So when it lands, it won't immediately go after you, it will shortly immediately go after you. Now, and reduce the detonation radius versus players from 3 meters to 5. So I'm assuming that's either when it grabs you or when it initially hits the ground. But now also bounces off walls and detonates on the ground. You cannot just throw it at a wall and have it track somebody that is up somewhere. You actually have to have it land on the ground. So there's opportunities to run and outrun Cold Snaps and evade it even more so. Now, for the Titan Behemoth, the Shiver Strike, reduced flight speed and distance. 100%. I really wish they didn't do that for the PvE purpose, because that is a broken PvE thing, but I'd love to do it still in raids. Reduced knockback versus players. Remove slow detonation on player impact. So I'm assuming it's only applied to whoever you hit and not anything near you. Now keep in mind, I do believe this is all PvP still. Now it requires the Titan to sprint for 1.5 seconds to activate the Cryoclasm slide before activating when not in Super, and there is no cooldown. So basically, Cryoclasm is now a shoulder charge. Instead of meleeing though, it is a slide. It is able to do whenever, it just takes freaking a sprint warm up to actually get going. So that works in terms of still breaking things. It doesn't work so well in terms of just randomly sliding in for Crucible. Now, Howl the Storm, removed angle of initial freeze damage, or reduced angle. This is the uppercut that we got, I believe, last season. Reduced crystal creation freezing radius, slowed down sequence of crystal formation to allow victims more opportunity to escape. Now spawns a small crystal on walls if performed into walls. Now for Glacial Quake, reduced heavy slam vertical freeze range versus players. Reduced damage resistance from 50% to 47%. So they're a little less tough mid-super. And you can't freeze above you as easily as before. That was super annoying when they would slam on the ground and you're 10 feet above and it would still get you. Now, to nerf the Hunter's Dinkers, the Withering Blade, reduce slow duration versus players from 2.5 seconds to 1.5 seconds. Reduce Whisper of Durance slow duration extension versus players from 2 seconds to 0.5. So Whisper of Durance, the extend slow fragment, that is now less powerful. Reduced damage versus players from 65 to 45, after one bounce reduced further to 30. So it is not so easy to just throw Withering Blades and dink people and hurt them easy without even trying. Reduced projectile speed by 10% in general, and reduced tracking after bouncing off a wall. So basically, hunters, you actually gotta see the guy to actually get a logical hit on somebody using the Withering Blade. You can't just keep flinging them bounce walls and hope they actually grab somebody every time. Now, Winter's Shroud, reduced slow duration versus players from 2.5 seconds to 1.5, and also reduced the Whisper of Durance slow duration extension versus players from 2.5 to 5. Now, Touch of Winter, this is the grenade aspect buff thingy. Cold Snap Seeker no longer has increased movement speed or travel distance. Now spawns a small stasis crystal on detonation. Excuse me. Has something coming up. Couldn't control it. Warlock Shadebinder. Penumbral Blast. Reduced tracking and proximity detonation size and tracking versus players. Reduced freeze radius versus players from impacting the environment from 2.7 meters to 1.5 meters. Basically, you can't just throw it on the ground and hope to get the splash damage as easy. Ice Flare Bolts. Seekers now only chain once when spawned from a player shatter. So, Ice Flare Bolts, they won't just chain from player to player at random. Now they actually have to shatter. So, Ice Flare not as OP. Freezing projectiles tracking strength now ramps down to 0 after 2 seconds of flight. So basically, after the projectiles for Winter's Wrath, the Warlock Super Stasis, when it's flying, it will not track after 2 seconds of flight. Now, that is all the Stasis nerfs. It is generally all around pretty hammering, and this is essentially, I believe, I am going to continue saying this, only for PvP. So, that being said, moving on to rewards. Seasonal reward sources, including locked override chests in the weekly vendor challenge, now correctly contain seasonal class armor items that have been updated to reduce the frequency of getting duplicate items in succession. So the seasonal override powerfuls and all that should actually have the full range of abilities. The Iron Banner machine gun and shotgun will now drop from the Iron Banner engram, so hopefully if you saved your tokens, you can get an Archon Thunder or Grease Walker shotgun. Now, Vaulted Glass Director Tooltip will retain its Pinnacle drop notification for classes that have not yet cleared it each week, as drops will still be available. Basically, if you cleared it on one character, the other two characters wouldn't have the Pinnacle reward ping, basically saying, figuratively, you already did it. But since you didn't, you would still get rewards. They fixed that. The Vaulted Glass Secret Chests are now properly dropping Titan and Warlock armor. So apparently that was bugged. I did not see that. So ye Titans and Warlocks should be properly getting armor if you think you've been cursed. So Vaulted Glass vendor purchases of the Templar package no longer occasionally grants incorrect weapons or armor. I had been noticing that. Vaulted Glass vendor purchases of the Templar package is no longer locking itself out due to incorrectly detecting the player has obtained all of its possible results for the current character class. So, as well, Vaulted Glass vendor purchases from Conflux, Gatekeeper, and Atheon packages now correctly grant armor when such a result is rolled instead of nothing. So, they fixed all the vault reward drops, they fixed all the vault cheeses, and Stasis Nerf has officially landed. Good moves on Bungie, honestly. People have been complaining about Stasis, and if you weren't complaining, you're a part of the problem, honestly, as far as I could tell for the Crucible community. If you weren't complaining about how stupid Crucible had been without Stasis, then you were one of the people abusing it and making it worse. So, all around, good fixes. Good progress for Bungie. As much as I hate hearing people say only freaking buff, no nerf. Nerf's gotta happen, folks. It's a video game. You can't only buff. You just can't. So, with that hotfix in the gutter, time to move forward. I'm not sure if servers are still on, but likely whenever you're watching this, they have been. But that is all of the hotfix for you today. With that, my name is Matt Scorpion, and I will see you in the next video.